Hello and welcome to ACTV 20's Health Matters. I'm Dr. Erich Parks and I have a great show for you today. Today we're going to be meeting with Patty Cohen, who is an ordained minister, and her attention got caught a little while ago in a subject called biological decoding. Now that didn't ring a bell with me right off either, but I think you're going to want to hear about this. So I'd like to introduce my guest, Patty. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we've been on before, but for those people who don't know you, I want you to give us a little of your background. Where are you from? How it got you interested in the biological decoding?
Okay, I'm a California girl. I was born right here in California. And my main interest in my main education was in human development because I was very interested in how to make families work better. Mm-hmm. And easier, how to make it easier to parent, because it wasn't something that was really easily taught in many homes. So
There's no course on parenting. So
I took a lot of them. They didn't say everything that I needed to learn, so I kept discovering more. I continued my education and ended up getting a master's in divinity. And the reason I did that was, again, to help families. And so that led me to continue a spiritual quest. Mm-hmm. And I went to see a spiritual event in Northern California in which Lee Carroll talked about biological decoding. And he said, you can learn to heal with a word.
With a word?
With a word.
Okay.
And there was a teacher coming from Argentina to come teach it. And I thought, oh, that's going to be way over my head. That's just huge. I don't know if I can do that. So a couple months later, I went to one with Dr. Todd Ovakaitis, and he said, you can learn to heal with a word, and that word is love. So I took the course, and it's an amazing, amazing process to me.
So it resonated with you, and that's what led you into more discovery with that.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to try and contextualize what we're going to talk about today. For those of you who've seen my show before, you know that I really try to focus on the triad of things that actually cause disease, illness, and all the symptoms that we experience. These imbalances are always linked to a combination of physical, chemical, or as we might say nutritional, or emotional events. And in reality, we like to take those apart to see maybe what started the whole cascade. But in reality, it's always a combination of those three things. The emotional components, there's a chemical component, and there's very definitely a physical component. So when I look at healing, I look at it from those as a basis for healing, as opposed to allopathic medicine, which is what our traditional medical system is based on, which looks at symptoms and trying to alleviate symptoms rather than finding the underlying causes. Typically, when we discover a cause, it's due to one or all three of those components, but they're always all involved. Now, I was intrigued because the biological decoding looks at these three aspects as well, but really is powerfully helping people in one component that's typically weak, and that's the emotional component, which is, as you're going to tell us a little bit more about the spiritual aspect of that, but how that influences our health. So tell me a little bit about the philosophy, the underlying basic philosophy of biological decoding and how that helps us.
Biological decoding is really a spiritual activity that helps you uncover a dramatic event.
A traumatic
event that was dramatic, unexpected, and lived in isolation, and it led to a disease. So if you can discover what that event was just before you got sick or had an accident or injury, you can discover what that traumatic event was, and you decode it, finding out what code you gave your body during that event, and change that again with love. Then the healing is very quicker, and it doesn't tend to return.
So it again looks at the cause, the basis of what triggered a series of events or a vicious cycle.
Yes. Yes.
And that's so critical to the functional medicine practitioners. How do we get to the core of what's causing the problem? Because a lot of times we do everything right physically and nutritionally, but yeah, we still don't get the good result over the long run. So you were telling me some stories about how you access this information. So can you tell us a little bit, if I were coming to you, how we start this process?
Yes. So it starts with a diagnosis. There's a diagnosis from a physician, or an actual event where someone broke something, or there was an accident. And we look into what happened in the person's life during that time. And using the biological decoding model that Dr. Claude Sabat developed in France, we look at a number of factors. So it includes Germanic New Medicine. And
Germanic. From Germany.
Germany.
Okay.
Dr. Hamer discovered, he's an oncologist, and he discovered that he got cancer. And he said, that's just too weird. I just get cancer like that, you know?
This is an oncologist who's surprised people get cancer. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Yes.
I'm with you.
Yes. And he says, why? Why did I get this cancer now? And why this type of cancer? And he realized that it happened right after a very traumatic event. His son was killed.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very traumatic, unexpected, and lived in isolation. He wasn't able to discuss it or take care of it in the ways that he had wanted to because of the circumstances. So he asked 2,000 of his patients what happened just before the onset of the cancer. And in 100% of the cases, there was a dramatic event that was unexpected, that was lived in isolation. And what that means is they weren't able to talk about it because they were afraid, ashamed, preverbal, or some other reason that they were prevented from discussing this. And so with those 2,000, he explored more, and now there's over 40,000 who have had the same type of thing happen.
Well, that's really, I mean, our audience is probably going, well, a traumatic event. I mean, I stubbed my toe. Does that qualify? Or do you have to actually fall downstairs or create some life-altering traumas? I mean, what's the degree of trauma?
A dramatic event. So something very dramatic that was unexpected. So have you ever experienced a trauma or drama where you sort of got tunnel vision, everything else disappeared and you couldn't move forward? You're kind of stuck in that moment. It's very, very dramatic when you get that tunnel vision type of thing. So it's that big of an event. It's that big of an event that would cause.
And there was a follow-up to that. You said that not only was there a traumatic event, but there was the inability to either verbalize or socialize about that event afterwards. So it becomes internalized.
It becomes internalized. So when you have that tunnel vision type of event, what happens is the brain can't deal with it anymore. And like, you're either going to lose focus and get killed while you're driving or doing something else, right? Or get exhausted and die. The brain will get exhausted. So the brain is trying to keep you alive.
Right, it's a survival mode.
It's a survival mode. So it takes all that stress and it places it someplace that makes sense, and it puts it there for you until you have the time and ability to deal with it. And it makes sense in terms of where the body places it. So every part of the brain is connected to a part of the body. Okay. So where that traumatic event where the brain decides to place that in the body, it places a marker actually on the brain. There's a tiny edema that forms at the moment.
Now that's a swelling in the brain.
Yes, and it shows up on an MRI as a bullseye. So it's called the Hamer focus.
Oh.
And it can be seen. And Dr. Hamer won't see a patient without getting that MRI.
Wow, so he can know what area of the brain is involved.
Right.
And follow up by helping them identify that. Let's say that area of the brain is for hearing. So he knows that maybe there was something associated with a noise, a sound, a voice.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, very interesting.
If a person loses their hearing, you might follow it up and find out that there was something that they didn't want to hear. There was something dramatic, unexpected, and lived in isolation that they didn't want to hear. So you might follow that up and find out what dramatic event happened in the person's life that would cause that issue. And then what decisions they made about themselves, because there's always a code. You make a code internally
Right.
that says maybe perhaps something negative about yourself. And then if you can decode that by changing it with love, loving, like reprogramming.
Right. So these events, so that seems like one of the first things that you would do after they've been diagnosed or the person knows they have a condition of some type, and then you've helped them to identify a trauma that occurred where they didn't get to process that properly. Then the next step seems to be to identify what else that might be connected with. Is that the next step?
Meaning physically?
Well, physically, emotionally, chemically. I mean, I don't know where do you go from there?
So, say a person has a blood disorder. So there are many, many kinds of blood disorders. So you might look at what emotional event was taking place, or a long-term event that was taking place just before the diagnosis. You stay with your treatment with your doctor, and you continue your treatment.
Right.
But by looking at the dramatic event and the emotional issues that go with that, then you can balance yourself emotionally, and you continue to balance yourself with the medicine from the traditional medicine or naturopathic. Or
Right.
however.
So you're talking about, I think you told me there was an action plan. This is where you would help to identify what a process the person could go
Yes.
through to help them resolve or talk through or go back and relive what they should have done in the first place.
So there's 5 steps that are
Okay, let's talk about that.
that generally go with that. There's a diagnosis. And with that is you get the knowledge. You get the knowledge of the disease, of what your anatomy, what's going on in your body. You need to know that. You need to know what plants or medicines will help with that. And you need to know if it's surgery is involved. You need to know a little bit about metallurgy, how these things are going to be used. So there's a great deal of knowledge gathering that happens at the beginning. And then there's, can I look at my notes?
Yeah,
Yes,
sure.
yes. Because I want to make sure
And
I put it
I
in
want
order.
to tell everybody, if you would like to see this is a PowerPoint that she actually does
Yes.
for groups. So she'd be happy to come out and do PowerPoints, or you can get copies of her work by going to her email and asking for it. She's very open with this information, and it could be very valuable to learn this.
That's perfect, because the next step is openness. Yes. Openness to discover in yourself what led up to the disease. Discover what was the traumatic event, what was going on in your life at that time. And that can be hard. It's not easy for people sometimes to really go back and look at those things. And then the next part of the process is sort of letting go of what decision you might have made about yourself. Like I said, what negative decisions you may have made, what kind of programming.
Judgments that you've made about yourself.
And it's you about yourself, it's internal. And then letting go of the limiting beliefs and programs. So you would just let go of what decisions you had made. And then what you would do is accept where you're at now. This is where I'm at, this is what I have to work with. And then you make an action plan to move forward. So you continue your treatment with your doctor. You find out everything that you can to go in that healing step. And in the future, you might learn that you don't keep isolated when emotional things happen.
Not healthy.
It's not healthy.
Right.
It's not healthy. Your body will find a way to store that for you until you learn how to handle that. So there's 3 ways that works.
Okay.
First, the mind evaluates that there's an issue, and that's that tunnel vision kind of thing. Then the brain gives an order of what it's going to do with that information, and then the body just executes it. And so let's say there's a bus coming, and you've begun to cross the street. The mind will evaluate, if you don't get out of the street, you're going to die. Yeah? And so the brain gives an order to the body, get out of the street, and you jump back. And the body will stay there until it gets a new order. And so this is a way of explaining how disease might work. So when the mind decides that the bus is passed, the trauma is passed, you've resolved the issue, then it will, then the brain will say, okay, all is clear, you can cross the street, or we don't need this disease anymore.
Right.
We don't need this to talk to us anymore because the problem is gone.
It's not serving us anymore.
It's not serving us anymore.
Well, that makes sense, and I assume that then there are techniques. When you say we let go of whatever it was, it's more than just saying, okay, now let go of that. You know, there's techniques. I know I've interviewed people before who have specialties in that letting go portion. Do you have a special technique, or do you work with other people on that? How do you help people with that?
How we help that is that we help them learn what decision they made. What program did you put in your body? What actually did you put in there? And then how could we transform that? By talking about it, about how to transform it. We might do a ritual. If there's someone who's passed that you've had a traumatic event with, there are techniques for writing them a letter and mailing it, or there are many rituals, many different kinds of things that you can do to help resolve that.
Yeah, to be at peace with that.
Yeah, be at peace with it. And let go of it by mailing that letter.
Right. Well, that's real important. I know that in the work that I had done in the past with neuroemotional work, oftentimes when things don't go away, in other words, we don't resolve, there's a recording. And I think what you're getting at here is that we learn from a very early age that we're victims of circumstance. You know, it's not our fault that we got a cold. It's not our fault that we fell down the stairs. Well, in reality, it's always our fault. We have a role to play in all of these things. And the decisions that, like you were saying, that we make consciously or unconsciously are part of our own result from decisions and actions that we've made. So as I tell my kids, there's no wrong decisions, there's just consequences. So when you have, what I'm hearing here is that when you have a traumatic event that the body didn't process, that it does store it. And I know this from the acupuncturists that I've interviewed. They know that there are certain meridians that carry these emotions, and wherever those emotions are, there's a specific meridian and organs associated with that. So it's very real, and we want to know, you know, what techniques are out there. And I think, you know, this is really a fantastic method of getting to that emotional, that event-oriented basis, and learning. And as you were saying, it's very powerful to learn that you're not a victim, that you have control of these things. And even once that's discovered by people, I realize sometimes letting go isn't that hard, because, oh, it was originally my decision, so I can make a decision to do that differently, or to look at that differently.
Yes.
Fantastic. Now, what are some of the action steps? You talked a little bit about what, you know, as far as the techniques go that you use to help people with the different aspects of
It actually
illness.
depends on what the issue is,
Sure.
right? Of course. So you would, like I always say, continue with your medical treatment, whatever that might be. Do rituals, and if you need help with those, you know, you can contact me or another biological decoder. If if it has to do with something that you need to bury, you might create a little funeral. There's just different things that you can do that put a completion on it.
Right.
Complete the issue in one way or another.
I see. Are there physical actions that people can take? I mean, I realize that sometimes, now we're talking about illness primarily here, and it could include cancer, it could include lymphatic cancers or other reoccurring conditions, even probably chronic back pain or obesity or diabetes. Those kind of things are diseases that have a link to what you're talking about here, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can you give some examples? It's so fascinating to me when you give me examples. I just go, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. And diabetes was one of the big ones that I heard about. That
Diabetes is amazing.
Yeah,
it's a resistance disease.
Resistance.
It's a resistance. So it's in the blood. It has to do with an imbalance in the blood. So, of course, an action would be to balance your blood, but more importantly, to get to the issue of it. The blood is our circulating joy.
Okay.
Right? So when you have good gasoline in a car, then it runs well. And same with our body. If we have good circulating, healthy blood, then we're going to be balanced and everything's going to go well for a long time.
All right.
But in biological decoding, it's referred to as our circulating joy. So you might find out where you lost your joy. You might find out what emotional event happened. And I have, there are books that help you discover what those are. There's a lot of them. But then you can do what it is that you need to do for your joy. I have one client who had a pretty significant blood disorder, and I looked around her house, and she's got signs all around that say joy. She's got, it's a big theme in her life, joy. And when we looked at it, there were many places where she had lost her joy, and where she wasn't doing what she needed to do to bring that joy back into her life.
Okay. So when you have a condition like diabetes, which is a blood sugar dysregulation, it involves liver, which can go back to, in acupuncture words, that's your anger, resentment, aspects of emotions. So do you find do you get into what emotional state led up to a condition like diabetes? Does that enter into?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. There are many people with diabetes and pre-diabetes. And anger. Again, it goes back to joy because it is a blood disorder, correct?
Right.
Ultimately, diabetes is a blood disorder.
Yeah, you can imagine anger and resentment would take away joy, wouldn't it?
Yes. So there's resistance. You find in diabetics that they want to argue and fight and resist, and if they can find what it is that led to that, and there's a reason usually.
Right.
But for my my friend who we were able to reverse her problem with her blood. She realized that she needed to, what would bring her joy would be able to express and write about the things that she knows, how she could share, how she could turn around and help humanity. So we started her with 3x5 cards. Just take notes of all those things. Now put it into, the written form. Now make a graph and a chart, and she's so excited. She's so happy, and she no longer has to experience the phlebotomy appointments.
So you have seen people get over their diseases by addressing these omissions or these repressed experiences.
By talking about them,
Yeah.
and then taking the action. And for her, the action was writing and teaching. So for each person, it's a little bit different depending on what was the dramatic event that led to it.
Right. Okay. Are there any other cases that you think are interesting? I mean, things that you find commonly that people might out there identify with?
The most exciting thing to me was how it works with cancer.
Yeah.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, and especially with there's such a wide database from the Dr. Hemmer
Yeah, and many others now.
Yeah, and many
I mean, this is worldwide. It's not so popular in the United States. There are many people getting trained every year by Enrique Boron, comes here from Argentina and teaches. He'll be teaching in October.
In here?
In the United States.
In the United States.
He teaches in Carlsbad.
Oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
right down the street.
Yes.
So are you, do you take these courses yourself
do.
then? Okay. And would people, I mean, is it open to anybody who wants to learn?
It is
or-
open to anybody who wants to learn. It's very popular with physicians and dentists.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yes,
Yeah. So tell me more, a little bit more about how people can get in touch with you, because I know that people out there may have been diagnosed with a condition, a disease. Maybe they know they already have something, diabetes or cancer. How would they, what's the steps involved in getting in touch with you?
call my cell phone,
Okay.
530-277-4581. Email me, cohen.patty@gmail.com. There is a website, www.sacredamerican.com.
Sacredamerican.com. Okay.
Yes. Because every breath you take is sacred.
All right. There we go. Well, okay. So then if people have questions, would you be open to just giving them information, or do they have to become a client? How do you work that?
I would love to talk to them. I would come speak to them personally or their group. They could come visit me.
Great.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can make arrangements.
Well, I know that this topic is one that we could get into for hours because there's so much to delve with, but I think we've gotten to the essence of it. You said you can heal with the word, and I like that. I think that the basis for this has a lot of potential to help people get healthy, stay healthy. Certainly as part of a regime that people can do, and you know, like you said, there are activities that people can be involved with on a daily basis that can help remind them of their joy and what they're thankful for. Yeah.
The most important thing is to take action.
Take action, yes. Well, I'm all for that too. Okay. Well, thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time on Health Matters. Thank you.